Without any further ado, I would like to introduce to all of you Congresswoman Esty, who's here to talk to you tonight and take your questions and your issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. It is very clear, abundantly clear, that terrorism is a real threat. ISIS poses a real threat, Al-Qaeda does, and we need to be tough, and we need to be smart, and we need to be vigilant. But we need to do so in a way that reflects our values, and we need to do so in a way that is in concert with our allies around the world. And that is a real challenge right now. We're certainly seeing that Europe is struggling with that challenge of sharing information, dealing with borders, how to incorporate people in their own communities. So I stand strongly to make sure that we are fighting terrorism each and every day, here and abroad. Next.
In an age when our state is experiencing necessary job cuts, why would we accept Syrian refugees at taxpayer expense? Here are a few facts and statistics. According to the Center for Immigration Studies, a family of 4 refugees will cost taxpayers over $250,000 over 5 years. Refugees go to the front of the line to receive benefits available to Americans. And so where does that put our veterans? 12 refugees can be kept safe in the Middle East for what it costs to settle 1 refugee here. Resettling refugees here cannot rationally be considered to be a charitable act when virtually no religious minorities in the Middle East are being saved. And in fact, Obama has sent back to Iraq and to almost certain death many of the few Chaldean Christians who have made it here. One concrete example of fiscal pain is that the Lewiston, Maine Public Schools ESL budget increased 4,000% over 15 years due to refugees, and that's just the ESL budget. And this doesn't even address the threats the refugees bring to our security. The ideology of Islam is in direct conflict with the freedoms guaranteed by our U.S. Constitution. We can vet these people till the cows come home and still not be safe. Why? Because when people are raised with the ideology that says that Islamic Sharia law must rule the world, there is no limit to whether and how much violence must be employed. So please tell me why we're doing this.
This country has a long, proud tradition of welcoming refugees and welcoming immigrants. It was a kind of war country that was built on immigration. And in the aftermath of World War II, the U.S. played a leadership role with nations around the world in saying, what are we going to do to make sure this never happens again? That what happened in Nazi Germany never happen again in this world. And it was in the aftermath, and it's important to understand the historical context, in the aftermath of World War II, and the slaughter of millions of people, in part, large part, because of the religious leaders, that this country proudly led a commitment on the part of the world community to say we are going to address this, and we're not going to let this happen. Now, as part of that, we agreed to take a certain percentage of refugees agreed upon as part of international organizations about who actually constitutes a refugee. And we, in the United States, take a relatively small number, and there's been discussion about increasing that number, and our commitment, which was originally out there. The numbers now around Syrian refugees are still very small. We've been at 2,000, looking to increase it to 10,000. There are about 4 million Syrian refugees, just to put this in context, who are either displaced within the country or displaced in surrounding countries. I think it's an important part of what we do as not just Americans, but as human beings, to support people in distress. I'm a sponsor of the resolutions in Congress to recognize and support the religious freedom of people in Syria and elsewhere, and to enforce that in whatever way we can. Give priority to those who are being persecuted because of their religious beliefs, whether they're Chaldean Christians or whatever their religious views may be. I respectfully disagree, and you and I disagree about whether Islam is a faith that is inconsistent with American values. I believe there are people who are misusing Islam in service of their own seeking to gain power and to inflict violence on others. I know many Muslims who do not share those views, and I think that is a mischaracterization of a billion people in this world. So I suspect you and I are not going to agree on that piece. But I do believe we need to continue as the U.S. to be a beacon of hope and light, not just for Syrian refugees, but from refugees from other parts of the world, as we have been for decades, and that has made this country greater and stronger. I can tell you from the classified briefings that we have had that the most significant threat that we face is not from refugees. The most significant threat we face with ISIS and with the misuse of this ideology, we saw evidenced in Brussels 2 weeks ago. And that is the fact that in Europe, we have people who carry European passports who have either become radicalized or frankly are criminals who have decided to affiliate with ISIS as a way to further their violent tendencies, and then have come back into Europe, having trained and having been further radicalized in Syria. We do not have good ways right now for these folks who carry European passports of being sure that we've identified who they are. And we saw that happen in Brussels 2 weeks ago. What we saw happen was that Turkey had identified several of these people, had reported it to the Belgians, and the Belgians did not act on it. So that tells me that we really need to look at even deeper something that I called for and helped sponsor legislation that passed overwhelmingly bipartisan legislation to toughen up what's called our visa waiver program. And effectively, it's what allows them to come into the United States from considered friendly countries, so it's mostly Europe, but some other countries that we have good relationships with. I think in light of what we're seeing right now, we really have to take a hard look at that program and think about what more we need to do. We've toughened up those rules, but I think in light of what's happened in Brussels, we need to look even harder at those. We need to be sharing intelligence and counterintelligence, and we need to assist our European allies in doing a better job, but we also need to insist that they follow protocols that we need, or we're going to have to look at whether we can let folks in without a visa. I think that's tremendously important. The numbers there, to give you a sense, on the order of 20 million people a year. 20 million people a year coming through the visa waiver program to visit the United States. So this is absolutely something we have to look at while we're seeing these major security lapses in Europe. And we should be working hard with our European allies to help them deal with this, but to protect us here on the homeland. That is the most likely route through, by far. Clearing the need is to just get on a plane and come here. And so that we need to look at very toughly. I hope I can get your help and support for those efforts. Yes, sir.
We haven't gone to war with Syria at all. So we're not in any war with them. We've lied about Iraq and every other war since then. Obama has written executive orders for everything. You talk about them coming in with visas. What about the southern border being wide open? Mexican news agency, I'm not sure which one, actually recorded two running over the fence with backpacks and cell phones as they were jumping over, with two custom agents' vehicles sitting right next to them with no stop at all.
So this is a fascinating video, Martha. You take a look at it, where it was being filmed, U.S. side of the border, Nogales, Arizona. A Mexican journalist randomly filming that fence when these two guys, you see one of them there, the other one comes over in just a couple of seconds. They're carrying those large backpacks that you can see there. Now, what was in those? Hard for us to say. But they then get sight of the woman filming them. And if you go to the next part of the video that we've got ready for you, they start shouting at the woman, "Don't stop filming us," obviously. Then one of them says to the other, "She's still filming." And at that point, having gone across the street away from the fence, they turn back, see them right there, and scale that fence. And just look at how easily they go up there. You have to assume not the first time those two guys have done that particular journey. But anyway, there they go, back over to the Mexican side of the border, Martha.
Custom agents have come out on news saying they're not allowed to do anything.
The willful failure to show up for court appearances by persons that were arrested and released by the Border Patrol has become an extreme embarrassment for the Department of Homeland Security. It has been so embarrassing that DHS and the U.S. Attorney's Office has come up with a new policy. Simply put, the new policy makes mandatory the release without an NTA of any person arrested by the Border Patrol for being in the country illegally, as long as they do not have a previous felony arrest conviction, and as long as they claim to have been continuously in the United States since January of 2014. The operative word in this policy is claim. The policy does not require the person to prove they've been here, which is the same burden placed on them during deportation proceedings. Instead, it simply requires them to claim to have been here since January of 2014. Not only do we release these individuals that by law are subject to removal proceedings, we do it without any means of tracking their whereabouts. In essence, we pull these persons out of the shadows and into the light just to release them right back to those same shadows from whence they came. Immigration laws today appear to be mere suggestions. There are little to no consequences for breaking the laws, and that fact is well known in other countries. If government agencies like DHS or CBP are allowed to bypass Congress by legislating through policy, we might as well abolish our immigration laws altogether. In the absence of consequences and enforceable laws, innocent people are hurt, criminals are rewarded, chaos abounds, and cartels reap huge financial benefits.
So when will you uphold the Constitution and the oath that you gave unto God and to the people to protect our borders and our liberty? You did more legislation and more fighting against the Second Amendment after Sandy Hook than you have done anything for our borders being open and these refugees coming in. Have you seen any of these videos lately? I mean, these people are going like this. Little 6-year-old kids are doing neck slashes. Protect our borders. Protect the Constitution. Do what you were supposed to do. You haven't stopped one executive order yet. I mean, we aren't getting any answers from anyone.
On the security borders, we need to secure our borders. Totally agree with you. That's why I'm a sponsor of the comprehensive immigration bill that we were not allowed to vote on in the House of Representatives in the last Congress. And they haven't even bothered to bring it up in the Senate in this Congress. You talk to people who have looked at the immigration issue over the years and say it's got to have several pieces. When you've got to secure the borders, but you also have to have a system for dealing with 11 million people who are in the country right now. In the country with kids enrolled in schools, working in jobs in this country every day. And you can't just wish that away. And putting up a wall does not deal with that mission. So we need to have a multi-part one of secure borders with a path to citizenship where people get at the back of the line, have to pay taxes, make sure they comply with the law, so that they are criminals. If they have committed offenses in this country or in the country where they came from, they should be sent back. And we absolutely should be enforcing the law. We're completely right about that. But when you talk about with Syria, I mean, there are a number of issues. So let's look at what the president has done in the foreign policy context. That is a failure of Congress to do its job. Congress has not declared war in 50 years. They've left it to presidents to make declarations and commit American troops, sending sons and daughters of this country into harm's way. And it's wrong. Our troops deserve to have our support. They deserve debates on the floor of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And they deserve to know they have the backing of the American people. And I can tell you that was something I heard from troops when I was in Afghanistan. They want to see that the American people are behind them, and they deserve to know that. We can't do that if we don't have debates on that. If we don't have votes on what's called the authorization for the use of military force. And it's wrong. The fact that Congress has been doing it for 50 years doesn't make it right. And I think they should. So the president has responsibility as commander-in-chief to exercise certain authority. And when Congress doesn't do its job, whether it's President Nixon or President Reagan they are going to have to fill that void if Congress doesn't step up to the job to do its responsibility, to be the voice of the American people, and to actually genuinely debate what should be the scope of military involvement. And that's got to happen. And that's why I've been calling for that since before getting elected to Congress, and will continue to do so. Because I know our troops need and deserve that. And it is not smart for American democracy, and it's not right for our troops to do what we've been doing. And that's whether or not you agree with any particular president's actions. So right now, there hasn't been any authorization for the use of the military force since about 2002, 2003. The situation has changed. At that point, we were looking at Al-Qaeda. ISIS didn't even really exist at that time. So I think we do need to be smart. We do need to be tough and nimble. But Congress, currently controlled by Republicans in the Senate and the House, has not called up any of this legislation. So we can talk about who's to blame for that. But I think you want to hold, as you're raising, as you should, in this room, what am I doing? That's what I'm doing. Working with our troops, working with our veterans, and hearing loud and clear from them. They deserve to know where the American people are. They shouldn't be sending to harm's way without knowing they have the backing of us here at home. And we can't do that unless we do our jobs and have debates on the floor of the House and the Senate, because that's our job to do. So I'm going to keep fighting for that, and I hope you'll join me in urging my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to have a debate on the authorization of the use of military force. And we can disagree about what those controversies should be, how involved, or whether we should be involved or not. But the voice of the American people is reflected to its duly elected representatives in the U.S. Congress. And when Congress doesn't do its job, the president's going to step into that void, whoever the president may be. And if we want to right the balance, Congress needs to do its job.
I just had a quick question in terms of what the strategy is moving forward, both federally and on the state level, as we look at this issue of heroin use and abuse. We kind of touched on it in a question earlier, but someone that works very closely with young people, I'm seeing the direct impact of what heroin is doing to our young people. Just wanted an idea of what some of the strategies are, both federally and statewide.
Well, we're looking at the federal level on heroin. There are 50 of us who are part of a bipartisan heroin task force from all across the country trying to figure out what we can do. So we're looking at what are the best programs out there, do more of the best programs and fund them. I'm particularly passionate about looking at prevention. So that really goes to a lot of the programs you're doing, is giving your kids boundaries, giving them resources, keeping them busy, giving them stuff to do so that they aren't bored, they're not hanging out with the wrong kids. It's an access question for them. We need citizen education. This was part of what passed, the Senate passed a bill, as you may have read a couple of weeks ago. And one of the provisions in that bill is part of my big prevention bill, and that's on education for people to understand what these risks are. There's a fallacy out there. There's this idea out there, it can't be my kid, it's somebody else's kid. Like, my kid wouldn't have, my kid wouldn't get involved in that stuff. There is a community in the state that doesn't have some kids doing heroin right now. Not a single community. And don't think it can't happen to your family, because it can. Because I get those calls in my office, not in my office, I get them at home now, from friends saying, Elizabeth, and when the call starts, I kind of know what's coming. You probably have no idea, but, and then I know, they're going to tell me, probably one of their kids is an addict. And we're just losing too many young people. And this is something that demands, and I think we'll get bipartisan support, because it's just wrong. It doesn't have to be this way. But more broadly, what it means is that, shaming and blaming is not the way you fix problems. You fix problems by trying to get to the root of the cause, get people to work together to answer the question, and all of us take ownership in making it better, rather than spending our time blaming someone else for how we got here. What we do is, how together can we get out from where we are to a better place? And I'm a relentless optimist. That must be why I do what I do in the current Congress. But that optimism has allowed me to get 4 bills passed in the last 15 months, 3 of them signed by the President. And I think I've got one. I think the one on prevention of prescription drug and addiction will be another one. Because we have to do better for the future of this that when we do that, we'll kind of understand there are a lot of other problems we could make big progress on too. And I'm hopeful that this sad, awful, tragic epidemic we're seeing might open our eyes to how at the end we're all the same. We all want a brighter future for our kids. We all want good jobs. We want to be respected. We want a clean earth, and we want the world to be safe and there to be more peace. We all want that. And so what can we do to advance that? And the fighting doesn't advance that. What does advance is our working together. And this is a great country. We have that opportunity to work together every day. And vigorously disagree, as some of us do on some of these issues. But because we love this country and we care about the future, that's why we keep at it. That's why we keep at it. And we stay in conversation, we stay in dialogue, and we keep working till we get it better. We may not get it perfect, but we can get it better.
Thank you for coming. Well, two questions.
Yes.
One, you mentioned the fact that the southern border needs to be protected. When will it be protected?
Well, I think it needs to be part of an overall thing. So to just spend billions, millions and millions of dollars on the border without addressing the overall system is something that we really need to do.
The system in terms of welfare?
That
Or overall
has to do
everything?
Over
Jobs, food.
Immigration reform writ large, because if you just secure the border, as it were, without dealing with these other pieces, you've still got...
No, I totally agree with you. I think that's what we need to do.
It needs to be part of something comprehensive. So I don't think piecemeal makes sense because, again, part of, in politics, how you get stuff done is say, like, some people want something, some people want something else. Let's get a bunch of pieces together. People may like different pieces, but overall, you get something better done. And I think there's an opportunity. I hope after this election, whatever happens, that there's an opportunity to really do that.
Well, let's hope there's no attack on this country with our border being wide open. Then what will you say and do?
Well,
will you come after the Second Amendment then? Again?
So I disagree with you about my coming after the Second Amendment.
Well, there's no right to infringe, and any infringement is infringement.
The Second Amendment is
But
not different from any of our other 10 amendments, which under circumstances reasonable, as there is, free speech is not entirely unfettered. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Let's spend time worrying about our border, though.
Which is why, on the comprehensive background checks and making sure those are in place and that we don't have the
How about let's not have any come in? Let's close the border for a time being until we can figure out what's really going on. Second question is, Geraldo Rivera went to Afghanistan, and he interviewed some soldiers in Afghanistan at the time guarding opium fields for the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or ISIS, whatever you're naming them this week. I don't know. But he interviewed the soldiers, and they were actually guarding the poppy fields. Opium, which is what our problem is. Ever since the United States went in 2001, there was about maybe a 10% growing of opium under the Taliban. Now that we've taken over, there's 100%, and we're guarding their fields. What are we going to do about that? Because that could be a cause of our opium problem.
That does not match with what I heard and saw when I was in the Eastern Provinces.
I'm sure they only sent you to the only places they want you to go to.
2 months ago, no, they talked about it. Control of the opium fields is a real issue. Frankly, right now.
It is the most unintended and awkward consequence of our military offensive here in Afghanistan. The rout by our Marines of the Taliban from their former stronghold here in Helmand Province has put us in the weird position of being protectors of the largest crop of opium in the world.
Thanks, Geraldo. And guess what, guys? The Taliban had banned and almost completely eradicated opium in Afghanistan shortly before the U.S. invaded. Just look at these headlines. The corporate media was even lauding the Taliban's success. Fast forward to today, where over 90% of the world's heroin originates from the war-torn country. According to a report from the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, this year saw opium production surge to a record high. The report said that the harvest this May resulted in 5,500 metric tons of opium, 49% higher than last year, and more than the combined output of the rest of the world.
You've got the Taliban fighting against ISIS about who controls those poppy fields. Something that's different from 2003, 2005 is, and this ultimately, it's got to be the Afghan people themselves who decide they don't want these folks there. They don't want the Taliban. They don't want ISIS.
They don't want us, but we're still there.
They want our help to get these guys out and stabilize their country. And part of my being there was to try to determine what is their interest in actually securing their borders, defending their own country, because no amount of military might on the part of the United States can substitute for the will of people in their own country to defend freedom and secure their borders and push out these dangerous elements. And I heard sort of uniformly, and there were Democrats and Republicans on this trip. There were four of us, including John Klein, who's a former Marine One pilot, who's decorated Vietnam veteran, fought in Vietnam, Purple Heart Award recipient. He was also surprised that we heard more of an assessment of building capacity and interest on the part of the Afghans in really pushing back, and that they really do want to secure their country and are more committed to that than was the case a number of years ago and are showing greater capacity. Under those circumstances, we have more of a legitimate role to play in actually helping them secure, to not have that country become a black hole that slips back into. Right, we don't want to have that, and that is where Al-Qaeda started. That they did have designs and still do on taking down our country. So I think it's important that we work with the Afghan government, which is the only democratically elected coalition government in the region, that's got a lot of its own problems, but moving towards trying to govern themselves, educating girls and women. These are important things that would be good for the region if we can do this.
Well, let's protect our border instead of spending money on theirs. We protect the 38 parallel, but we don't even protect ours. But Congresswoman, I appreciate you coming. Thank you very much.
And, again, I think as part of a comprehensive strategy, it ought to be done. And I agree with you, it ought to be done.
But like I said, let's guard our border, because if there's an attack on this land, what's going to happen next? That's what I fear. Thank you.
And I thank you for your passion.
Thank you, ma'am. You have a great day.
Taking the time.
Thank you.